Afternoon, my name is Nathaniel Albright, Director of Respiratory. First thing I want to show you that is a little quirky, but the on and off switch. So the on and off switch is right here. It's a stainless steel switch that hangs down. It will not move back and forth. This is so no one can brush it and turn the machine off. What you have to do is pull this little sheath down and put it to the right in the on position. So don't try and force it because you could break it. Then the machine will fire up and it will give you an option to do a pre-use check. Please make sure we're connected to oxygen and air. These are the 50 PSIs. You'll know that you can make a pretty loud sound. Okay, so it'll list you, do you want to start a pre-use check? And that would be yes. So it's all self-diagnostics, okay? So we're gonna connect, it tells you, we have a tube that'll come with all these machines. This one is, we usually tether them, this one got cut off, but it says go from the inspiratory. You see the picture in the expiratory, and then hit OK. It makes a bunch of clicking, and it's just self-diagnosing that everything's working. It roughly, I'd say, takes about 3 minutes, but I can tell you from lots of experience that it feels like 15. One of the things it does do in the middle, they want to test the battery power, so it asks you to unplug the machine to make sure the battery works. So just unplug the machine, it'll prompt you to plug it back in, and that's one of those. Okay, so the next step is, we've been using this for the compliance, but now they want to test the patient's actual circuit. So we remove this, and you attach the actual circuit, which we'll look at before. We have our cascade. So remember, this goes to the patient. Pardon me. This goes to the patient, gets humidified, because this is our humidifier. Okay, and then, so gas goes here, to the patient, gets humidified, and this actual blue corrugated tubing goes to the patient. And the ET tube goes here. And then this white portion goes on the exhalation. You can see that they're both labeled. Exhale and inhale. And we do put a HEPA filter to try and protect our cassettes, because you don't throw the cassettes away. These cassettes are multi-patient use. So then we just click OK, and we check the compliance of the tubing. Make sure that there's no leaks. So this is the Y, shaped like a Y, and an upside down one. And it's just gonna blow air out. Oh, there was a cap on this. So take the cap. And we passed. Ready to roll. You hit OK, it'll take you back to the main screen. And one thing about this ventilator is that if you do a pre-use check, it passes the pre-use check. Now it does say, do you want to save other patient information? No, we don't want to save the recent patient's information. So now the pre-use check will list that it's been passed on this date at this time. If we say we didn't want to use this machine, we could leave this machine in standby. As long as it's plugged in and we leave it on this screen in standby, the pre-use check is good for until used. If you were to use this machine and then that patient were to get extubated and go home, then you have to get rid of the circuit, and we have to do a new pre-use check for the next patient. To set up a servo and to set up a Mindray, it's the exact same setup, just so you know. They're two different vents, but it's the same setup. You need your RT110 circuit, okay, RT110. You will need a cascade, which is what holds the humidity and heats from the bottom. And you will need a HEPA filter. I've got a couple examples. As long as it says that it's a HEPA filter on them, okay? These are all different kinds of HEPA filters. We've got a lot of leftovers from COVID, so we're just trying to use them all. So you start with this, and you end up with this. We have a small tubing. It's about 16 inches. It goes from the inspiratory port onto our cascade. Now, I think we showed earlier that the cascade just slides off of the heater, just slides that metal plate to one, and then you have the inspiratory line, which is blue, mind you, and it goes to the cascade. Then we have the expiratory line, which is the white version of this line, and this goes to with a HEPA filter, because remember, all the air, if a patient were to be COVID or something like that, this is exhaling that, so we want to catch that in our HEPA filter before we go into our expiratory cartridge. And this goes right on. So we got expiratory, inspiratory. This is an ET tube, and this cap. Okay, you'll notice this blue cap. It's just a little hat for the Y. It comes off, and then there's a hole here, and this fits to the ET tube. This also fits directly to our suction catheter, which will fit to the ET tube. So that is a 15 millimeter hole right in there. All right, so remember, it comes with this cap. If the pre-use check is done, then you can move forward with this machine. But if it's in yellow and it says the pre-use check is not done, please watch the video that I made on how to do a pre-use check, and then you will get to this stage where we are right now, where we can actually initiate ventilation on a patient and put it on their ET tube and choose the settings. So you'll see we have here, we've got, most of you guys, we're gonna be doing invasive and adult. So we already have that working for us. So now we just can check our different modes, which the providers will assign you, which say a popular one is PRVC. Now, if you look, it'll list your O2, your PEEP, your respiratory rate, your tidal volume, your inspiratory time, okay? Your trigger, and your rise time. Sorry, I can't even see it on my glasses. So we can change any of these. All right, if we want to make a tidal volume 500 or 450, let's say, you plug it in and you hit check for correct. Respiratory rate, let's say we just want 12. Okay, and our PEEP 5 is fine. So we want our O2 at 50%. There we go. Our rise time is fine, our inspiratory time is fine, the trigger is fine as well. So we accept these. Okay, and then if you look at the screen, there's a button that says start ventilation. So we start ventilation. We have our, you'll notice we have still have our little cap on here. So I'm gonna put on a bag, which is, this is our patient right now. And it will start to ventilate. So it might, it takes a while for a couple of the alarms, like okay, up in the corner you'll see I just touched a button, yellow, left corner, that is the alarm silence. We're waiting just for the minute ventilation, because it takes a little while for the minute ventilation to rise, because it's supposed to be a minute. So now we're on a screen where it's showing you, it's showing your volume, and showing your flow, and it's showing your pressure. So you'll see, if I do something, like let's say a patient's lungs are a little stiffer. You'll see on the pressure, it's not as square, up and down. So, and it's going to let you know that the pressure might be a little high. And you'll see along the bottom, you still have these, you still have your main 5 components you can add to them if you want to change your O2, PEEP, respiratory rate, tidal volume. Probably just keep it to the simpler ones. So these are your 4 main components that that ventilate somebody. You got your tidal volume, respiratory rate, PEEP, and O2. It lists your peak pressure, all right? It lists your peak pressure, your respiratory rate, your tidal volume. We got a lot of fancy stuff here. Then we have our PEEP, all right? We got our mean pressures, your ID ratios. So there's a lot of stuff here, but your main concern is that just make sure that you're getting your tidal volume and your inspiratory, expiratory tidal volume are matching, and your respiratory rate is matching, and your PEEP is matching, which we're all in a pretty safe area. We're set at 5, we're at 4.9. Remember, our bag is a piece of plastic and rubber. So on our menu bar on the left-hand side, all right, we have a button called Alarm Limits. It's just below the modes, all right? So it's gonna say what you can set your peak pressure, your PEEP, your respiratory rate, your minute volume. You can hit this button, Auto Set Alarms. And the machine will base off of what the patient's feedback is, will auto set all the alarms. And you hit Accept, and it will set the alarms for you. It keeps the alarms in that particular mode. It keeps the alarms very tight. So if you have somebody, for example, that coughs a lot, you might want to, you know, move the peak pressure up a little bit because it's just 10 above. And if they're coughing a lot, or it's one of the alarms that you know would want to maybe move up. So this one, but your PEEP is good. Respiratory rate, you know, those are ones that you can auto set. So it's a good maneuver to use. So this is a list of modes that we use. This is pressure control, which is pressure based as opposed to volume based like the rest of them. By vent we're not going to use, so we either use a volume or a pressure mode. PRVC is a pressure regulated, it's a volume mode, but it has it's a volume mode, but the pressure is variable. The machine actually itself takes readings from the patient and can adjust the flow according to their pressure. Then we have, these are all control modes, you'll see. So we're basically setting the tidal volume and the respiratory rate. If you move the next tier down, the interactive modes. The interactive modes are SI and B, which means they provide a tiny bit of support. So they provide a tiny bit of support. We have SI and B with pressure control. We have SI and B with PRVC, which is that variable one, and SI and B just with volume. So SI and B helps you out a little bit. It's kind of like giving you a cane or a walker. And in the control mode, you're in a wheelchair where someone else is doing all the work. In the support mode, you're on your own. We're giving you just the least amount of help. We usually use pressure support and CPAP. So what it's doing, it's like the same as a BiPAP. It's just providing a little bit of pressure and a little bit of PEEP. And you're doing all of the initiation, all the breathing on your own. There's no control breath. So, but there is backup alarms if you want to go into CPAP. So right now we have our CPAPs actually. PEEP. So the apnea time, you'll see it's set at 20 seconds. So if you don't breathe for 20 seconds, the machine's going to kick into different control mode, a control mode that it's going to help you out. So it'll recognize if you don't take a breath for 20 seconds. So this is CPAP. It's not going to do anything because our bag is, it's not alive, but you see, if you touch it very lightly, it's very sensitive. That thinks it's initiating a breath. As we go down this list, we have standby. Sometimes you have to put people in standby ventilation. They go down to CAT scan. You hit that. Now, one thing I want you to notice is you'll see is that You can't just hit this button. You've got to hold it for a couple seconds. So they make sure it's just a fail safe. And then now if you see a screen like this, it means the person is in standby. If it's saying standby, they are in standby. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So just because the machine is live and the screen is full doesn't mean that they are. If you were to come back from a transport and put somebody on a machine like this, they would get no ventilation because it is in standby mode. You have to start the ventilation mode. So in order to go into standby, we hold that button for about 3 seconds. And that'll put you in standby. Then we have our modes, of course, we went over. Then we have our alarm limits. Maneuvers, I think we can stay away from this. But if you're a practitioner, if you're an intensivist, and you want to know, you can give a manual breath. So that'll give a breath for the person, and you can do your static. You can do your static measurements here. So if you want your compliances, this will do your compliances. All right. You just got to do an inspiratory hold, and then it'll give you your numbers. Same with the expiratory hold. All right. So now you have your static compliance and many others. Your total PEEP. So that's if you want to do more high level and you're comfortable, then you can do stuff like that. The next one is views. You can change the view. We're just in basic right now. There is a more advanced view. You can actually go into a view where if this one's called, there's a distance view, which is always good if you're like for example with COVID and we didn't want to go in the room and the vent was far away, it gives you all of the major numbers that you want to see, and you can see it from a distance, especially for somebody like myself that has trouble seeing. So let's see. Now we have, if you're going to prepare to suction somebody, you want to disconnect, but most of the suctions are in line, you can do this and it'll give them a quick boost of 100% oxygen. So for the suctioning. And last one is locking the screen. So we don't want to lock the screen. So I'd stay away from that one, kindly. So if you're using one of these devices, and there's the Servo, and you want to use it in peds, you'll notice in the standby screen there are some dark gray options. One is to start ventilation. There's also adult, invasive, and PRVC. If you want to switch it to pediatrics or neonatal, these are your options right here. You would just tap that and press the one you want. It's going to ask you some questions. Of course, is this a new patient? You would say yes, it's a new patient, and you would use a different circuit. But that's just from the ventilator standpoint. That's how easy it is to just switch into peds. Same with adults. Just go back to adults, and that's that. If you wanted to go, we are in invasive mode because we're using, this would be on an intubated patient. But if you wanted to go to non-invasive and use this in a non-invasive mode, that's the same thing. So of course, it instantly goes from PRVC to pressure support because you can't use PRVC in a non-invasive. So some things you can do. You can also, in standby, change your settings. So you can change your tidal volume. You can change your O2. So if a person's coming in, you know they're going to need 100%, a tidal volume of 500 or something like that. You can set all that up before you even start the ventilation. Yes. If we are going into the pediatric or neonatal modes, there's another circuit that we use, which is not the same as the adults, the RT266. And you'll see it's much thinner. It's much thinner than, it's about half the diameter. And it does come with a cascade in the bag. And this fits the expiratory line on this, fits the HEPA filter, no problem. As I said, respiratory are Legos. So, Hello everybody, I just want to make a point that in a lot of the circuits, except for this one, which is the RT110, the Cascade does not come in this. There will be separate ones available on the floors, so it's just not in the kit, so you have to grab it separately. So just to be aware of that. A lot of the R2 kits that we have, they come with this. So this is what it looks like completely set up. But if you get this and it's not set up, it's just the wire's wrapped around, you unwrap the wire, and then there's a blue tab right here, and you just pull that off, and that's your chamber. So that would basically look like this. See? They're twins. So you slide that on. You slide that on, and your inspiratory and your other inspiratory. Now, the whole point of this chamber is to humidify the air because we don't want to give people dry air. So one of the ways we do it is you'll see on this, on our heater right here, okay? Well, there's two pieces that go into it. This is called a pigtail. It's got two separate heating devices on it, and it plugs in perfectly. You'll notice that it's yellow to yellow, and it goes in very easily, okay? And then you take the two ends and you plug them. You'll see that one has a triple and one has kind of a double. So the triple one goes into the inspiratory right here. Confuse these guys. It's the shorter of the two, and it fits right in. You'll see it's shaped kind of like a triangle. You can see. And then the longer of the two goes into the expiratory. Now what this does is it heats a circuit inside of this tubing. And we just have to measure and add a water element. So this is just a basic sterile water bag that's up. This with gravity hangs. And if you look at this when we open, you just pull your tab and you'll notice that this has a spike, okay? You spike your bag, and you let it just gravity hang, and it fills up this chamber with water, okay? And then as we turn this device on, here's your power. Now you'll notice, complaining. Okay, you'll notice that there is an invasive and a non-invasive. We're gonna leave this. We'll try to have this preset for everybody, but this is in the invasive mode. So the last piece to this puzzle is our temp probe. So all this is gonna do is with two different ports, it's gonna measure the temperature inside the tubing. It's gonna do it from here to here so that we don't make the area in the blue tubing too hot for the patient. It keeps it moist in there so that it's easy for the patient's secretions to. So at the very base, you'll see a little triangle. It fits right into the triangle at the top. So you can see it fits perfectly. And then at the distal port, there's a piece here that fits in there. Then it plugs into our Cascade heater, and there's a blue. You can see their color match. So just spin it around until we. So it's complaining right now because it doesn't have any water. But this is the on and off. This is the whether it's invasive or non-invasive. So that's the off, and there's the alarm silence. Major alarms you get on this thing is if your wire's not working, if your water runs out, if one of the wires is just not working. Those are the most major alarms. There's no like kink alarm or anything like that. It's just measuring temperature. If the temperature goes too low or goes too high, it's gonna let you know. We usually set it about 32, 33 for invasive. This is our Servo, a Servo U, and this is our Mindray SV800. They look, if we strip everything down, they look very similar, okay? But one of the major differences between the two, remember, this will say Mindray up in the top left corner, is that on this machine, this is your inspiratory and this is your expiratory, both labeled inspiratory to the patient, expiratory away from the patient. And on this one, this is your inspiratory and this is your expiratory. So it's the complete opposite, okay? So when we're setting up our inspiratory, we do it on the right side as opposed to the left side over here. So that's something I just want to point out to everybody. Important. Okay, this is our Mindray SV800. This one has a different turning on mechanism. It's actually just a button in the very front, the bottom left-hand corner. It's just an on and off switch. And you'll turn it on, it will initiate. Says hello. Okay, and then it's telling you that there's its own pre-use check, which it does have its own pre-use check. You'll see it'll give you a diagram in the front. So this is your inspiratory, this is your expiratory. It's basically telling you to take your tubing and your Y, and you connect your Y. There's a little nut, 15 millimeter knot right here. It's like the same size as an ET tube, okay? And then we just hit continue. And this is where it will be very similar to the Servo. It's just doing its own diagnostic checks. And as I recall, I think this one is faster than the Servo. So it passed. Now, very similar to the last ventilator, you can go into standby. It'll let you know the system was checked, and very similar to the last ventilator. If we want to use our humidification setup, it's basically the same thing, except that remember, as I said, the inspiratory is on the opposite side. So the gas comes in, it gets humidified, goes to the patient, and gets exhaled. Okay, it's just in reverse. You'll see we're in standby. We can start ventilation. So in the same, if you want to do your settings in advance, you can change your settings. This one actually has a knob, so you can up and down your oxygen. So we say put in 50%. Your tidal volume, so we go down to 450. Get our frequency up to 15. Okay, our PEEP will leave at 5. And very similar, start ventilation. Alarm silence, it's just building up the minute ventilation. And that's what a high pressure alarm will sound like. You can silence your alarms, but when it's red, it can only let you silence them for so long. And if you want to go into standby, you'll look in your menu bar over here. Alarms, the bottom one is standby. Are you sure you want to go into standby? Yes, and it'll put you in standby. Now remember, when it's in standby, just because it's on and you see vent settings, it is not ventilating. You have to turn the vent on. Okay. Same with both of them.